Hey everybody, I'm Mike, and today we're getting the bee yard ready for new bees to arrive next weekend. So I guess the best place to start is with an introduction. I'm Mike. I'm a beekeeper in Middle Tennessee. I've been keeping bees for about 20 years, off and on, and it's been more off lately than on, and we're just getting back in gear again. I keep bees eh, at my home primarily. I used to have bees in other agricultural areas, had bees permanently placed at area farms. And since then, I've scaled back just because of time constraints. You know, I don't make a living as a beekeeper, so I have to have a job, and that means I have limited time for my hobby as a beekeeper. Here lately, I have more time to devote to this, and so we're going to get things going again next week. So this is my bee yard. It is, as I said, a corner of my yard. It was pretty overgrown, and so we had to do a lot of cleanup here and getting this out in the open. I've got good wind block on the north side here, and then the hives are placed in a nice sunny location. Um, Plenty of direct sun for the majority of the day, which is essential for controlling pests. Um, and so we're going to get things cleaned up and ready to go, so that next Saturday when the bees arrive, I will be able to install them in the hives, and they can get to work setting up shop in their new home. So if you are new to beekeeping, I'll give you just a quick tour of how I have things set up here. These are essentially some pressure treated boards that are set across some concrete blocks out here just to keep the hives elevated and off the ground. It seems to work pretty well. I'll probably need to put additional blocks here in the center just to provide some support so this doesn't sag in the middle. But other than that, it doesn't have to be real fancy. Bees will live anywhere they're comfortable living, so if we don't have designer homes for them, it's okay. And if you do have a designer home for them, they'll probably live there anyway. But this is a typical Langstroth beehive. And we'll just run through the components from the top to the bottom. We begin with the telescoping outer cover. This is a wooden frame, and it is sheathed in metal. You can also get these made out of nylon or other plastic, and it works really well. I have some nylon covers, telescoping outer covers that work really, really well, and have worked well for a number of years. They're extremely durable. Underneath the outer cover is our inner cover, and this is really just a way to keep the bees from gluing this outer cover to the box. And you can see that it does have a hole in it for ventilation, but other than that, it just sits right on top of the box. It's the same dimensions, same width and length as the hive bodies and the honey supers. So it just sits right on top of there. Inside we have 10 wooden movable frames, and these frames are set up with waxed plastic foundation. I also have some with pure wax foundation. I have some with drawn comb. And so, the bees are just going to make themselves at home here. The frames are wood, and that one has a moth trying to set up on it. Let's encourage him to leave. But the frame is just a wooden frame. that it has, this one has a groove in the bottom and in the top, so that this plastic foundation can just be snapped into place and then put in the hive. The frames are made so that when you put 10 of them in the box and center them in the box, that they're spaced properly for bees to draw out their comb. This removable frame or movable frame hive is required in the area where I live. Now, of course, beekeeping regulations vary from place to place, so always check with your local authorities to make sure that you know um, what the rules are for you. But for me, I have to have a movable frame hive for easy inspection. And it just makes working with the hive that much easier. So the hive boxes are designed to easily accommodate 10 of these frames. I've also run them with just 9 frames, and so they're spaced out a little further. The idea there, especially when it comes to honey supers, is that a little extra space between the frames will encourage the bees to draw the comb out deeper and store more honey in a frame. I don't think it gives you more honey per box, because it's kind of a zero-sum game there. If you have, if you have a gallon of water in a 1-gallon jug, or you have a gallon of water in 8-pint bottles, you still have a gallon of water. And I think it's the same thing with the honeycomb. We can put a certain amount of honey in this box, and whether that's in 10 narrowly drawn frames or 9 or even 8 deeply drawn frames doesn't make much of a difference. I think if you're going to produce cut comb honey, then the thickness of that comb could make a difference in the visual appeal, but that's pretty much it. So these boxes have 10 frames in them. I do have some that have 8 frames, and there is Starvin' Marvin, the bee yard cat, right behind me. But however you prefer to go, it's all going to be fine, provided your frames are spaced separately, or spaced evenly. Beneath that box is a bottom board, and in this case I have a screened bottom board that lets debris fall through. Another reason I like to use the screened bottom board is to help control a pest known as the small hive beetle. With a screened bottom board, I can put a tray of diatomaceous earth underneath this screen. And diatomaceous earth is fossilized microscopic sea creatures. The fossilized shells are extremely sharp for their size. So if you rub it between your fingers, it might feel mildly abrasive, and it'll definitely strip the oil off your fingers. But for an insect crawling through it, it's lethally sharp and can kill a hive beetle that walks through it in just a matter of seconds. So it also plugs up the breathing tubes in their body as well. So a mechanical pesticide, which in my opinion makes it safer and more effective over the long term than a chemical pesticide. This board, this bottom board, you'll notice has a removable grid, so that you can so that you can measure mite drop or other factors that you want to measure um, as debris and dead mites and whatever drop through that screened bottom board. So the way this all goes together, you start with your bottom board. On top of that, I typically place a deep hive body. It doesn't have to be a deep hive body. I know beekeepers who routinely run nothing but medium boxes all the way up, and it works just fine. I like to give the bees a deep brood box or hive body for raising brood, and then stack medium boxes on top of that for honey storage. Whatever you use there, the next thing that goes on is the inner cover, and then on top of that, the telescoping outer cover. And that is the essentials of a Langstroth beehive. It's very simple technology. It really hasn't changed much in the last uh, couple hundred years. Some innovations like the screened bottom board, uh, plastic components, things like that, but they all fit together in pretty much the same way. Another thing that I frequently use, especially during winter or when starting a new colony, is an entrance reducer. And this is, let me bring this up to the camera so that you can see, it's really just a strip of wood, and it has a narrow notch cut in it. And if you turn it, you can see there's a much larger notch. And this fits right inside the entrance to the hive. And the goal here, especially when a colony is first starting out, or when we're overwintering a colony, is just to reduce the size of the entrance to the hive. For a new colony, it provides a smaller area for the bees to need to defend as they get set up in this box. Over winter, it keeps mice out, which is very important. The mice can be absolutely devastating inside the hive, and they'll get in there to stay warm because the bees will keep it very comfortably warm in there compared to the outside temperature in order to survive the winter. So the entrance reducer does, like I said, serves two purposes. It reduces the entrance to make it easier to defend for a new colony that's just setting up in this box. Over winter, it keeps intruders out, specifically mice, so that the bees can just worry about making it through the winter, not how do we make it through the winter and defend ourselves against this giant mouse that just moved in. Another component that I have is a feeder. Right now in Tennessee, it is late March and things are just starting to bloom. Our major nectar producing plants aren't really blooming enough yet to sustain the bees. We have plums. The pears just finished blooming. We have plums and peaches blooming. Actually, I think they're just wrapping up. The blueberries are starting to bloom. But the tulip poplars, which are the primary nectar source here, are quite a ways off. And so we'll need to feed these bees in order to help them make it through that dry spell when the nectar flow begins. And and they can really start putting away some food stores. So this is a pretty simple device. It's essentially a bucket and a lid. And we fill the bucket with sugar water. I use 1-to-1 simple syrup. It is 1 pound of water to 1 pound of sugar. A pint of water weighs 1 pound. So if you get a 4-pound bag of sugar, I'd weigh it out to make sure it's 4 pounds, and then put 4 pints of water on the stove, bring it to a boil, remove that from the heat first, then stir your sugar in until it's dissolved and let it cool completely. You want to make sure you remove that pan from the heat before you stir your sugar in, because we want to dissolve the sugar, but we do not want to cook the sugar. And then we can just pour that syrup in this bucket. This lid snaps on, and then when you turn it right side up, the syrup runs out into this trough, and then the whole thing slides into the hive entrance and will stay there while the bees drain it, basically. Especially with a new colony, you're going to want to check that every day. It is very conceivable, very likely, that at first they will drain that feeder every single day. So you want to make sure you check that frequently. Those bees are going to be focused on producing a lot of wax to draw out a lot of comb so that the queen can start laying eggs. And producing wax requires a lot of honey or sugar water intake. So make sure that you're checking that very regularly so that so that they don't run out of food. And that's essentially a tour of the beehives that I'll be setting up here. Behind me are pine trees that drop pine needles constantly. Pine needles make very good smoker fuel, and we can discuss that in much more detail next week when we bring home the packages and get them set up. I hope this has been informative. If you're new to beekeeping, welcome. It's a great, very inclusive hobby. Check with your local ag extension to find your local beekeepers association. I guarantee it's full of people who would love to share what they know with you. So check that out. Um, if you have thoughts about anything I've said, have questions about anything I've shown here today, drop a comment down below. I will respond to all of them. And then be sure to come back next time to see as we install our new package bees. Thanks a lot, everyone.